He had served 2 tours, been shot twice, watched friends die in his arms, and through it all, the only thing that kept him steady was Bruno, his K-9 partner, his shadow, his only real family. So, when Marcus finally came home, broken but breathing, he didn't ask for much. Just a quiet neighborhood, a porch swing, and Bruno at his side. But not everyone wanted him there. Especially not her, Karen. She didn't like the barking, didn't like the fur, didn't like him. Not because he was loud, not because he was rude, but because he was black. And to someone like her, a black man with a powerful dog, that wasn't just a neighbor. That was a threat. So one morning, while Marcus was out for groceries, she left a bowl in his yard. It looked like food, but it wasn't. And when he came home, Bruno was already dying. She smiled when the sirens came, said it was just a dog. But what she didn't know was that Marcus had spent a lifetime fighting monsters overseas. Now, he was about to face one on his own street. And she was about to learn, justice doesn't always knock first. Sometimes it breaks the door down. Speech balloon, what would you do if someone poisoned the only friend you had left and smiled? Backhand index pointing down, tell us in the comments. Pushpin like, share and subscribe to follow the full 10-part emotional story. They told him coming home would be the easy part. They were wrong. Marcus Daniels had survived Afghanistan IED blasts, night patrols, sniper fire, but nothing prepared him for how loud the silence would be once the uniform came off. No more mission briefs, no more brothers at his side, just an empty house in a quiet neighborhood and a porch that creaked in the wind like it remembered things too. But Marcus wasn't alone. Bruno was there. Bruno had been his K-9 partner overseas, Belgian Malinois, trained for combat, search and rescue, and bomb detection. But more than that, he was hard. When Marcus couldn't sleep, Bruno would rest his chin on his chest. When Marcus had a flashback, Bruno would nudge him gently, grounding him. When Marcus screamed in the night, Bruno didn't flinch. He just stayed close. The army retired them together. Wherever he goes, I go, Marcus had said. And the commander, a man who'd once told him to keep emotion off the field, just nodded and said, then he goes with you. They bought a small house in Maple Heights. 2 bedrooms. Fenced yard. American flag out front. Neighbors were mostly quiet. Some waved. Some didn't. Marcus didn't care. He wasn't looking for attention. He just wanted peace. He spent his mornings on the porch, black coffee in hand, Bruno by his feet. No words. Just breath. Just healing. The townsfolk called him the soldier on Elm. Not in a cruel way. More like they didn't know what else to call him. He was private, polite, quiet. Sometimes he walked Bruno at dusk, and kids would run up to pet him. Is he a police dog? He was a ward dog, Marcus would say softly. They'd always look at Bruno like he was a superhero. In some ways, he was. Marcus worked part-time at a mechanic shop. He didn't need the money. He just liked the rhythm of it, the way oil and steel made sense when people didn't. Bruno came with him most days, sat behind the bay doors, alert but calm, watching the world go by. Customers loved him. One woman even baked him treats. This dog's more well-behaved than my husband, she joked. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. But not everyone liked them, especially not the neighbor to the right. Karen, late 50s, short blonde bob, sharp voice, and sharper opinions. She never spoke directly to Marcus, only about him. I don't feel safe with that dog next door. Military dogs are trained to attack, aren't they? He walks around like he owns the place. Once, when Marcus was trimming his hedges, she came outside and sprayed Lysol into the air. Just stood there, misting invisible germs that only seemed to appear when he was near. Marcus said nothing. He'd seen worse. But Bruno sensed her. Every time she stepped outside, his ears would perk up. Not out of aggression, out of readiness. He knew something was off. One afternoon, Marcus caught Karen speaking to a police officer near her driveway. She pointed toward his yard. The officer looked embarrassed. When Marcus approached, he smiled awkwardly. Afternoon, Mr. Daniels. We just got a call, noise complaint. Dog barking too early. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Bruno doesn't bark. The officer nodded, almost apologetically, figured as much, just checking the box. Karen didn't meet his eyes. She didn't need to. Her message was clear. The next week, Marcus received a letter from the HOA. Concerns about pet safety, it said, a passive-aggressive suggestion that Bruno wear a muzzle during walks. Marcus folded the letter, didn't respond, but he made a copy and taped it to the inside of his front door. A reminder. Still, Marcus tried. He waved to Karen once. She didn't wave back. He offered to clear her sidewalk after a storm. She said, I don't take handouts. So he stopped trying. Not out of bitterness, out of survival. You don't try to reason with people who've already decided what you are. But through it all, Bruno remained steady. They'd sit on the porch as the sun set, Marcus rubbing behind his ears, whispering things he'd never said to another human. Some days I still hear the gunfire. Sometimes I wish I'd stayed. Thank you for staying with me. Bruno would lean into his leg. Silent. Present. Home. On Bruno's 10th birthday, Marcus cooked him steak, sliced it into strips, laid it over a ceramic bowl, lit a candle. They sat outside. The sky burned orange. Bruno licked the plate clean, then laid his head in Marcus's lap. You made it, Marcus whispered. Bruno's tail thumped twice. That night, for the first time in years, Marcus slept without waking. But peace is a fragile thing. And some people hate seeing it in others when they've never known it themselves. Karen's complaints increased. Loud music. Mysterious trash spilled on Marcus's driveway. Even a dead squirrel tossed into his yard, a warning, maybe, or just cruelty. He documented everything. Never reacted. Never retaliated. But Bruno started acting different. Eating slower. Breathing heavier. Marcus assumed it was age. Until that morning. He came home from a grocery run. Bruno wasn't at the door. Not at the window. He was in the backyard. Lying in the grass. Foam at the mouth. Eyes open. Still breathing, barely. Marcus didn't scream. He just moved. Scooped Bruno into his arms. Drove like the world was ending. Pulled into the emergency vet clinic shouting, "Poison. I think he was poisoned." The text took Bruno, disappeared into the back. Marcus stood in the hallway, hands shaking. Blood on his shirt. Memory in his mouth. We're coming back like a ghost he'd never buried. The vet came out 30 minutes later, shaking her head. I'm sorry. His heart stopped. Marcus sat. Didn't blink. Didn't cry. He just stared at the floor, like it owed him an explanation. Then the vet added. There were traces of antifreeze. A pause. It was deliberate. Marcus drove home in silence. Parked. Sat in the car for a full hour. Then stepped into the yard. And there, beside the fence, a small plastic bowl. Still half full. The smell sweet, artificial. And deadly. He picked it up. Saw the initials on the bottom. Etched in faded ink. KM, Karen Miller. That night, Marcus stood in the backyard where Bruno died, held the bowl in one hand, and made a vow. I've buried brothers. I've buried friends. But you? His voice cracked. I will not bury this. They didn't know what they took from him. Not really. They thought it was just a dog. A pet. An inconvenience. But Bruno? Bruno was the reason Marcus didn't end up with a bullet in his own head on a night 12 years ago, crouched behind a half-bombed wall in Kandahar with shrapnel in his leg and blood in his throat. Bruno was the reason he survived the war, and the war after the war. And now, he was gone, because someone wanted silence, because someone wanted the barking to stop, because someone didn't want a black man with a war dog next door. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of the mirror. Didn't recognize the man looking back, not because he was broken, but because he was dangerous again. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, and that scared him. He called the police, reported the poisoning. They sent a young officer. New, too polite, too rehearsed. Marcus led him to the backyard, showed him the dish. This is where I found him. The officer took a photo. Do you have security footage? Marcus shook his head. No cameras. It's a quiet neighborhood. The officer scribbled a note. We'll file a report. But without witnesses or video, It'll be hard to press charges. Marcus's jaw tensed. There were initials on the bowl. Initials aren't evidence, sir. Marcus stared. You'd say that if the dog belonged to your kid? The officer didn't answer. 3 days passed. Nothing. No follow-up. No questions. No knock on Karen's door. Marcus waited. Hoped, even though he knew better. Then, on the 4th morning, he stepped outside to find something taped to his fence. A piece of printer paper. All caps. Bold black letters. Control your aggression. Below it, in red Sharpie, you people are always violent. He didn't take it down. He left it. Let the wind tug at it. Let the neighbors see. Let the truth hang itself in daylight. He went to City Hall, filed a formal complaint, requested a hearing with the HOA board. They gave him a date, 3 weeks away. He said, "My dog was murdered." They said, "We're sorry for your loss, sir." At the grocery store, people stopped looking him in the eye. Even the ones who'd pet Bruno before crossed the aisle now. No one said the word, but he could feel it clinging to him like oil. Troublemaker. Not veteran. Not neighbor. Not man. Just problem. Then came the mail. An envelope with no return address. Inside, a single photo. Bruno. Curled up. Peaceful. Taken from behind a fence. On the back, one word. Done. Marcus burned the photo, but not the rage. That he folded, tucked behind his ribs like a service pistol he wasn't ready to use. He started documenting, took photos of everything. Karen's yard, her trash, her movements. Any time she stepped near the fence, he wrote it down. He bought motion sensors, set up trail cams, asked a buddy from the military, now a digital forensics expert, to help monitor his property line. The buddy didn't ask questions. He just said, "Whatever this is, don't go back to war." Marcus replied, "Someone brought the war to me." One afternoon, Karen approached the fence. First time since it happened. She didn't smile, didn't apologize, just sipped from her mug, a bright pink one that said "Love Wins" in curly letters. "I saw the cops came." Marcus looked up from his workbench. They left. Karen tilted her head. "Still think I had something to do with your mutt?" He stared at her, didn't blink. Didn't answer. She smirked. "You people always think everything's about race." Then she turned, walked away. But before she reached her back door, she called out, "Maybe you should have trained him better." That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He opened his trunk, pulled out a box labeled "Storage Do Not Open." Inside, a rusted combat knife, an old Army-issued notebook, Bruno's service collar. He held the collar for a long time. Then opened the notebook. Last entry, the day they left the field. "Bruno gets to live, so I will too." He stared at the words, then picked up a pen, and wrote under it, "Now it's just me, but I'm not done." The next morning, he filed a second report, this time with the State Department of Animal Welfare. He included vet reports, chemical traces, the dish, the photo, the hate note. This time they called back. "This may qualify as criminal animal cruelty under state law," the voice said, "but we'd need more." Marcus leaned into the phone. "I'll get it." He canvassed the block, knocked on every door. Some slammed shut, some never opened. But one, an old man, white, late 70s, cracked his door, looked him in the eye, said, "I saw her do it." The man's name was Earl, retired professor, didn't like drama, but said he'd watched Karen toss something over the fence the day before Bruno died. Didn't want to get involved, but didn't want to be silent either. "I didn't serve like you," Earl said, "but I know what loss looks like, and this ain't right." With Earl's statement, the case reopened. Police returned, questioned Karen. She lawyered up immediately, said it was harassment, filed a counter-complaint against Marcus, claimed he was stalking her, taking unauthorized photos, and making the neighborhood feel unsafe. Marcus received a notice, restraining order hearing, filed by Karen, set for the following week. He sat in his living room that night, hands folded over Bruno's empty bowl. Whispers came back. "You people, train him better." Aggression. But another voice cut through it, one deeper, older. A voice from his squad leader overseas. "You're not rage, Daniels. You're precision." He breathed. Once. Twice. Then stood. Because the war was back. But this time, he wasn't fighting for survival. He was fighting for justice. And he had no intention of losing. The thing about war? It teaches you how to wait, how to move in silence, how to observe, how to strike when the time is right, not when your blood tells you to, but when the moment does. And Marcus Daniels? He hadn't forgotten. The restraining order hearing was set for Tuesday. Karen had filed it with confidence, the kind of weaponized victimhood that only people like her could wield with a smile. "She said you're harassing her," Claire, his lawyer, said. "I haven't spoken to her since Bruno died. She said you took photos, followed her." Marcus didn't laugh. "Because it wasn't funny. I documented a crime." Claire nodded. "And we're going to prove it." The courtroom was small. Marcus wore his dress blues, not because he wanted pity, because he wanted presence. Karen wore white, like she was the innocent party. Her lawyer was loud, rehearsed, dripping with phrases like aggressive energy, threatening demeanor, and past trauma responses to uniformed men. Claire let them talk, then stood and read the vet report, the toxicology, the timeline, the neighbor's sworn affidavit. Then she handed the judge a copy of the anonymous note and the photo of Bruno, alive, peaceful, taken from behind a fence. The judge read in silence, then looked at Karen and said, "I don't see harassment. I see grief. And I see a man who's asking for justice, not vengeance." Restraining order denied. Karen's smile cracked for the first time. Outside the courthouse, news had already spread. Not media, neighborhood. The kind of quiet storm that starts with whispering door to door and ends with someone painting over the "Support Our Troops" sign on Karen's lawn. The HOA called Marcus, asked if he wanted to speak at the next board meeting. He said yes. When he entered, the room fell silent. Not hostile, but alert. He brought a photo of Bruno in uniform, placed it on the table. Then he spoke, calmly, clearly. "I served my country for 22 years. I've buried men with less ceremony than my dog received. He saved lives, and someone poisoned him for barking." He let the silence stretch, then added, "I'm not asking you to pick a side. I'm asking you to stand for what's right. If this happened to a child, would we still be waiting?" There were no claps, no cheers, just a slow nod from the HOA president. "We'll be reviewing the complaint against your neighbor." That week, Karen's world started shrinking. Vendors stopped delivering to her home. Neighbors stopped waving. A local dog rescue group left candles and flowers outside Marcus's gate, and a note that read, "For Bruno, a soldier's soldier." Karen ripped it down, but someone put it back up, bigger. Marcus didn't celebrate. He got back to work. He started an online petition, "Justice for Canine Veterans. Make animal poisoning a federal felony." Within a week, it had 40,000 signatures. Within 2, it hit 100,000. He was invited to speak on a local radio show, then a veterans podcast, then finally CNN. But when the producer asked for his big emotional moment, Marcus refused. "I'm not doing this to cry on camera," he said. "I'm doing this because Bruno can't." Meanwhile, Karen wasn't staying quiet. She filed a defamation claim, claimed harassment from radical animal activists, tried to spin the story, but the internet never forgets. Old social posts surfaced, anti-black memes, thinly veiled threats about protecting the neighborhood, a video of her yelling at a Latino delivery driver for parking too close to her mailbox. The narrative cracked wide open. The racism she'd buried in HOA letters and polite frowns was now on full display. Then the state attorney called. "We're moving forward with the case." Marcus blinked. Against her? Yes. Animal cruelty, property damage, hate, motivation enhancement. Why now? The voice on the line paused. "Because we can't ignore it anymore." The arrest came quietly. No cuffs in the front yard. No sirens. Just a knock. A short exchange. And Karen being led out of her house with a hoodie pulled over her head. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. No one spoke. No one protested. One even clapped, just once. News spread fast. Local woman arrested in alleged poisoning of decorated veteran's K9 partner. For the first time, Marcus's phone blew up. Not with condolences. With respect. A senator called. A foundation offered to sponsor a national version of his petition. And a mother from halfway across the country sent a message. My son was a handler. He lost his dog in the line. Watching your fight made him feel less alone. One night, Marcus stood in his backyard. Same spot where Bruno had died. He lit a small lantern, let it float in the air, climbing slow toward the stars. Then whispered, "They hear you now, brother. I kept my promise." But something still tugged at him. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter. Something like release. So he sat, opened Bruno's notebook again, wrote, "The war is over. For both of us." And for the first time since that day, he didn't dream about IEDs. He dreamed of a field and a dog, running free. The night Karen was arrested, the neighborhood was silent. But Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at the window, staring at her darkened house. The porch light was still on. No one had turned it off. He thought he'd feel something, relief, closure, maybe even triumph. But all he felt was the cold. The next morning, he walked the perimeter of his yard like he used to in the military, a habit burned into his bones. Everything was still, too still. Leo's bowl sat empty, his leash untouched, the paw-print-stained flag folded in the hallway. Justice had been served. But the house still echoed with absence. He turned on the TV. His face was on the morning news. Veteran wins legal battle after neighbor poisons service dog. He turned it off, walked into the garage, sat on a folding chair, and just sat. Claire called later that day. They offered her a plea deal. Marcus stayed silent. She pleads guilty to animal cruelty and hate-motivated property damage. 6 months in county jail. 5 years probation. No contact with you ever again. Still no reply. Marcus? It's a good deal. He finally said, Is it? That night, he stared at the old Army journal again. The page with Bruno's name. The page he couldn't bring himself to tear out. He picked up a pen and wrote, I can't tell if justice is supposed to make me feel better or just less alone. The next day, something strange happened. A letter arrived, handwritten, from Karen. He almost threw it away, but curiosity or closure made him open it. Inside, asterisk, you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But I didn't poison your dog because he was barking. I did it because every time I saw him, I saw you, and every time I saw you, I saw the world moving on without people like me. I didn't hate your dog. I hated what he represented. I hated that you survived and my son didn't, and I know that makes me small, and I know I can't take it back, but for whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. Asterisk, it wasn't an excuse. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a crack in a wall that Marcus thought would never break. He didn't write back, but he didn't burn the letter either. He folded it, placed it inside the journal next to Bruno's last entry, not as redemption, but as a reminder. A week later, Marcus was invited to speak at a military dog memorial event in D.C. He hesitated, then packed his suit, Bruno's collar, and the folded flag. The plane was quiet, the ride to the memorial quieter. He stepped onto the stage with no notes, looked out at rows of handlers, veterans, survivors, and began. When I first lost Bruno, I wanted revenge. I wanted someone to hurt as much as I did, and maybe that's natural. But revenge doesn't bring your dog back. It doesn't put weight in the empty leash. It doesn't stop the dreams. What it does is harden your heart inch by inch until you forget who the dog loved in the first place. He paused, let the silence breathe, then added, So I chose something else. I chose to remember. I chose to speak. I chose to make sure what happened to Bruno doesn't happen again. The audience didn't clap at first. They just stood, slow, one by one, until the room was filled with quiet honor, a kind of applause no microphone could catch. Afterward, a young soldier approached, early 20s, holding a leash. "You're the reason I didn't give up," he said. He pointed to the dog beside him, a shepherd with a missing leg. "This is Rook. They told me to put him down. Said he wasn't deployable anymore." The soldier swallowed hard. "But you reminded me he's not a tool. He's my partner." Marcus knelt down, scratched behind Rook's ears, and whispered, "You made it home, soldier." Back at his cabin, weeks later, Marcus sat on the porch again, coffee in hand, journal in lap. Birds sang, leaves turned, and something inside him settled. He wasn't finished, but he was no longer drowning. He started volunteering at a local shelter, worked with retired K9s, taught handlers how to cope with loss, spoke at schools about animal rights and respect. He never mentioned Karen. Not once. Because this was never about her anymore. This was about what came next. One afternoon, he stood under the oak tree where he buried Bruno. A new plaque had been placed. "Bruno, service, loyalty, home." A boy walked by with his dad, stopped to read it. "Who was Bruno?" the kid asked. His dad looked over at Marcus, then smiled. "He was a hero." Marcus looked up at the sky. Soft clouds, still air, and whispered, "Rest easy, boy. We did good." That night, he wrote his final entry in the journal. Asterisk, justice doesn't mean vengeance. It means remembering. It means building a world where what happened to you won't happen to anyone else. Asterisk, he closed the book, placed it on the shelf, and, finally, for the first time since it all began, he let go. Some truths arrive like lightning, others like slow rain, quiet, cold, and soaking everything he thought was dry. Marcus thought the storm was over, but he hadn't checked the sky. It started with a knock, a soft one. He opened the door and found a young woman standing there, late 20s, holding a folder and a worn messenger bag. She introduced herself. "Hi, Mr. Daniels. I'm Alina Cho, investigative journalist. I'd like to ask you about Bruno." Marcus's first instinct was to close the door. He'd already done the interviews, told the story, lived the grief. But something in her eyes was different. So he stepped aside. 5 minutes, he said. She didn't start with questions. She started with a statement. "I don't think Karen acted alone." Marcus narrowed his eyes. Alina continued. "I've been digging into her background. And what I found doesn't just explain her hatred, it complicates it." She opened the folder. Inside, emails, HOA memos, meeting transcripts. One in particular caught Marcus's attention. It was dated 2 weeks before Bruno's death, from a private HOA chat thread. Asterisk, "That man and his animal don't belong here. If no one steps in, I will. I have connections. A bottle of blue, and it'll stop barking for good." Asterisk, it was signed, KM. But the reply below was worse. From another HOA board member. "Just don't get caught. You know how they love to cry racism these days." Marcus stared at the page. He hadn't cried since the day he buried Bruno. But now, his hands shook, not from grief, from confirmation. This wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a coordinated cover-up, and they had thought they'd gotten away with it. Alina slid another page forward. "Karen didn't just kill your dog. She had help. And that help? It's still sitting on the HOA board." Marcus's jaw clenched. Why hasn't anyone seen this? Alina hesitated, because no one looked, until now. She had more. A neighbor, the same one who'd first told Marcus he'd seen Karen throw something over the fence. He had overheard part of the conversation. "If he loses the dog, he'll move," one woman had said. "Let's help him along." They wanted him gone. Not because of Bruno, but because he was a veteran. He was black. He didn't apologize for existing. Marcus stood, walked to the window, stared out at the tree where Bruno was buried. "I thought I was done fighting." Alina asked, "What will you do now?" He turned. "What I've always done. Finish the mission." That night, Marcus called Claire. Told her everything. She didn't hesitate. "We sue." "Civil or criminal?" Both. All of them. All of them. Over the next 2 weeks, the case expanded. Claire filed a civil suit against the HOA board for complicity, civil conspiracy, and racial harassment. A second complaint went to the state attorney general, and a third, the most personal, was delivered by Marcus himself. A formal demand to the Veteran Affairs Office asking for legislative protections for retired service animals and their handlers under federal hate crime law. The media pounced. Suddenly, the story wasn't about a poisoned dog. It was about a system. HOA cover-up. Racism and retaliation in suburbia. Veteran sues HOA after dog poisoning scandal widens. Talk shows debated it. Senators issued statements. One late-night host said, "If you think your neighborhood is safe from racism, ask the guy next door who had to bury his dog because his neighbor couldn't handle a barking war hero." Karen, now serving her sentence, refused to speak. But the board members? They panicked. One resigned. Another tried to delete her social media. A third released a half apology that only made things worse. "We didn't intend harm. We were just tired of the disruptions." Disruptions. That's what Bruno's presence had been to them. Not sacrifice. Not service. Just noise. Marcus went quiet again. Not out of fear. Out of focus. He created a new website, brunoashir.org. It featured photos, memories, resources for handlers, and a full archive of the case. Within a week, it had over 500,000 visitors. One message read, "My father was a Vietnam vet. He came home with a dog named Cinder. No one welcomed them. But your fight, it's the welcome we never got." Back in Maple Heights, the ripple hit harder. The HOA was audited. 5 members were removed. The entire board was dissolved and rebuilt publicly, and for the first time in neighborhood history, Marcus was elected as HOA president. He didn't campaign. He didn't even want it. But people showed up to vote, not out of guilt, but out of respect. At the first meeting, Marcus stood at the podium. No notes, no anger, just clarity. This isn't about vengeance. It's about vision. A community that forgets who fought for it will lose the right to call itself one. Then he tapped the gavel, and the room stood to applaud. Later that week, he visited the local elementary school, gave a short talk about Bruno, showed them his service photo, asked the kids one question. "What do you do when someone hurts what you love?" One girl raised her hand. "You protect it better next time." Marcus smiled. "Exactly. And maybe you teach the ones who don't understand. So they stop hurting what they don't see as valuable." Outside, one of the teachers pulled him aside. "Mr. Daniels, I just want you to know, my son wants to be a dog handler now. Because of Bruno." He swallowed hard, nodded. Then he's already halfway there. That night, he stood in his backyard again. Crickets, wind, peace. He whispered, "They know the truth now, boy, and they'll remember." A gust of air blew through the trees, and Marcus smiled. Truth is heavy, not just when you carry it, but when you choose to keep carrying it after everyone else wants to set it down. Marcus was winning. Karen was convicted. HOA leadership had flipped. The media hailed him as a hero. Veteran groups asked him to speak. But in the neighborhood, the air had changed. It was no longer hostility. It was something worse. Silence. At the grocery store, the cashier who once asked about Bruno now scanned his items without a word. On morning walks, people nodded but didn't wave. Even neighbors who had signed his petition seemed distant. Like standing beside Marcus was no longer safe. Like standing beside him meant they had to confront something uncomfortable in themselves. He didn't blame them. But he noticed. Online, it got worse. Troll accounts posted edited images, weaponized victimhood, the new American warfare. A local Facebook group, run by concerned homeowners, spread rumors. He planned it all. The dog was aggressive. He poisoned it himself for attention. The comments were brutal and familiar, not because Marcus believed them, but because the battlefield had simply changed uniforms. Claire called. "We can sue for defamation." Marcus shook his head. "No, let them scream. I'm not fighting shadows." He spent more time in the backyard, reading, gardening, listening to jazz, trying to remember what peace sounded like before it was politicized. At night, the dreams came back, not of war, of Bruno, alone, trapped, scratching at a fence Marcus couldn't get through. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, fists clenched, sometimes screaming, sometimes whispering, "I'm sorry, boy. I wasn't fast enough." He went back to therapy, first weekly, then twice a week. His therapist, a woman named Dr. Singh, never pushed. She let the silence speak. One day she asked, "Do you feel safe now?" Marcus exhaled. "Safe? Yeah. Seen? That's the harder part." Meanwhile, the legal system churned. Karen's appeal was denied. The civil suit moved to settlement, 6 figures, public apology, and a promise to create a community animal protection fund. But when the cameras showed up to cover the victory, Marcus stayed inside, watching from the window, Leo's collar on the table beside him. The VA invited him to Washington. They wanted to present him with a medal, civilian valor in the face of domestic injustice. He accepted, but made a condition. "I'll wear a suit, but Bruno gets the medal." On stage, surrounded by flags and uniforms and slow-clapping hands, he held the medal in one palm, stared at it for a long time, then looked at the audience and said, "This isn't for what I did. It's for who I lost, and who you didn't see until it was too late." Later, backstage, a woman approached, civilian clothes, tearful eyes. "My brother was your squad medic. He talked about you, said you were the one who made it out with a heart still intact." Marcus didn't know what to say. He just hugged her, and felt something soft and painful start to melt inside his chest. But not everyone was proud. An anonymous email hit his inbox the next day. "You think a dog makes you a hero? You're just another angry black man playing the system. Let it go." He read it once, then again, then deleted it. But that night, it echoed louder than gunfire. He didn't go outside the next day. He didn't answer calls. He just sat in the hallway beside Bruno's empty crate, running his fingers along the scratch marks still etched into the plastic. Not because he wanted to remember the pain, but because he was terrified of forgetting the love. That evening, he called Earl, the old neighbor who had first spoken out. They hadn't talked in weeks. Earl picked up on the first ring. "Still standing, soldier?" Marcus smiled faintly, trying. Earl chuckled. "You think you're losing the people, but maybe you're just losing the ones who weren't real to begin with." That hit hard, but honest. A few days later, Marcus was invited to speak at a small-town high school. They didn't ask for a speech, just a conversation. He almost declined, but then remembered, "I promised Bruno I'd speak when it's easier to stay silent." The gym was small. Students fidgeted, half listening, until he said, "My dog was poisoned, not because he bit anyone, not because he was dangerous, but because he belonged to me, and I was a problem before he ever barked." Silence. Then hands started rising. One girl asked, "Do you hate her?" Marcus blinked, then shook his head. "No, I pity her, because she saw a war hero in my dog and a threat in me." After the talk, one teacher pulled him aside. "Thank you. They needed that. Honestly, so did I." Back home, he sat down at his kitchen table, took out a sheet of paper, and wrote, "Dear Bruno, some days it still hurts to breathe without you, but I keep going because you never stop watching my 6, and now I owe that to others." He folded the paper, slipped it into Bruno's journal, then closed it gently, like closing a door, but not locking it. Outside, someone knocked. He opened the door to find a boy, maybe 12, holding a sketch pad. "I drew this." He handed Marcus a drawing. It was Bruno, wearing a cape, standing in front of a small house with the word "safe" painted above it. Marcus's voice cracked. "Why the cape?" The boy shrugged. "Because heroes don't always need superpowers." Marcus hung the drawing above the fireplace, next to Bruno's collar. And that night, he slept. No nightmares, just quiet. Because sometimes fallout clears the sky and makes room for something better. Something like healing. Something like hope. Recognition didn't come with trumpets. It came in murmurs, in paper-thin moments, in the way people started to look him in the eyes again and didn't flinch. It began at the dog park. He hadn't been in months. It felt like walking into a memory. The smell of grass, the distant sound of paws against dirt, the rustle of leashes and tennis balls and laughter. He wasn't sure why he came. Maybe he missed it. Maybe he wanted to prove to himself that he could stand there without Bruno and still feel whole. He sat on the bench furthest from the others, watched, waited. Then a woman approached, mid-40s, soft eyes. She didn't say hello. She just sat beside him and said, "I was one of the people who signed the letter. The one saying your dog was dangerous. I never met him. I just believed what I was told." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. She continued, "I came here every day after he died. And every day, I thought about what it means to stay silent. So I wrote something." She reached into her coat, pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He took it, opened it. It was a poem. Short, simple. For the dog who never bit. For the man we didn't sit with. For the silence that broke his back. And the bark that never came back. He read it twice, then whispered, "Thank you." That night, he placed the poem next to Bruno's photo. Didn't frame it, didn't post it, just kept it, like you do with apologies that mean something. Days passed, then came the invitation. A nearby middle school was naming their new library reading room after Bruno. Not because he was famous, but because one student wrote a letter. Bruno helped his soldier fight unfair things. Books help us do the same. Marcus went, wore a gray sweater. No medals. The kids clapped, awkward and sweet. One handed him a plush dog. "This is for when you miss him." He swallowed hard. "Thank you, soldier." The room had a plaque above the door. The Bruno room, for the ones who speak with loyalty, not words. He stood beneath it for a long time. Not moving, not smiling, just letting it sink in. After the ceremony, a janitor approached him. Older, skin like worn leather, kind eyes. "We've never met, but I watched everything. I've cleaned after their messes for 20 years. But you made them see something they didn't want to. I just wanted to say, I saw it too, and I'm grateful." Marcus reached out, shook his hand. "That means more than you know." Recognition wasn't about titles. It was about truth remembered. The next letter came from the most unexpected place. Karen's daughter. He didn't even know she had one. The envelope was plain. No return address. Inside, a single page. Asterisk, "I left home when I was 17. My mother and we didn't see the world the same way. I saw what she did to you, and I need you to know, not all of us carry her hatred. I'm sorry for what you lost. I'm sorry she never said it herself in a way that mattered. I hope you find more peace than she ever allowed herself to feel." Asterisk, he read it 3 times, then folded it, placed it beside the other letter. Not out of sentimentality, but because even broken trees sometimes grow branches that bend toward light. Then came a phone call from the mayor's office. "We're creating a Veterans and Service Animal Memorial downtown. We want Bruno's name on it." Marcus hesitated. He wasn't just a service dog. He was mine. The voice replied, "Exactly, and that's why he should be there." The unveiling ceremony was small. A granite wall etched with names, handlers, and their canine S. At the center, a bronze sculpture of a man kneeling beside a dog. Simple, strong. At the base, for words. No one left behind. When Marcus touched the bronze, it was warm from the sun. He closed his eyes, and, for a moment, he swore he could feel Bruno's breath beside him again. That evening, as he walked back to his car, someone called out, "Hey!" He turned. It was a teenager, baggy hoodie, holding a camera. "You're Marcus, right?" He nodded. The kid grinned. "My uncle was your tech in the 3rd unit. He said you were quiet, but steady, like a river with a spine." Marcus laughed for the first time in days. "That sounds like Roddy." "Yup. Said your dog was the only thing scarier than you." "That sounds like Roddy, too." The kid reached into his bag, pulled out a framed photo. I restored this from a damage drive. It's you and Bruno. The day you came back. Marcus looked and froze. He'd never seen this shot before. Bruno, leaping toward him. Marcus, arms open. Both faces full of light. He swallowed. Thank you. Recognition, it turned out, didn't need to be loud. It needed to be earned. And now, it was. One final moment came weeks later. Back in the neighborhood. He was mowing his lawn when a young black father walked by, holding his daughter's hand. They stopped. The little girl pointed. That's the man who speaks for dogs. Her dad knelt beside her. Yes, and for people who didn't have a voice. Marcus looked up. The man met his eyes, held them, then said, "You made it safe for us to walk here. Thank you." Marcus turned off the mower, looked out at the street, at the homes, the silence, the peace. This time it wasn't cold. It was earned. He went inside, opened Bruno's journal, wrote one line. Asterisk, they see now, boy. And in seeing you, they finally saw me too. Asterisk, legacy doesn't live in monuments. It lives in motion, in the hands you lift, the hearts you steady, the things you protect after you've already lost your own. It started with a call from the local animal shelter. Mr. Daniels, we heard you used to work with military dogs. We just got in a case that's complicated. He didn't ask questions. He just said, I'll be there in 10. The dog's name was Charlie, a 4-year-old German shepherd, eyes full of fear, a back leg scarred from old burns, found abandoned behind a gas station tied to a dumpster. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just trembled, like he was waiting to be punished for existing. Marcus sat outside the kennel, didn't speak, didn't reach, just waited. After 20 minutes, Charlie limped forward, one paw, then another, then rested his head against the mesh of the gate. Not trust, not yet, but hope. Marcus adopted him that week, not to replace Bruno, but to honor him. Charlie wasn't a soldier, but he was a survivor, and survivors recognize each other. Training started slow, not commands, not obedience, just safety, letting Charlie learn that voices didn't always mean danger, that food didn't vanish, that hands could be gentle. Marcus never rushed him. He'd seen what rushing broken things led to. And Charlie? He learned to sleep without twitching, to bark with joy, not fear, to walk without constantly looking back. Neighbors noticed. The quiet man who used to walk alone now had a new companion. A few waved. Some even stopped to ask his name. Charlie, Marcus would say, smiling softly, he's learning. So am I, he thought. One afternoon, a teenager from the neighborhood came to his door, skinny, nervous, holding a notebook. I'm doing a school project on veterans. My teacher said you were one. Marcus invited him in. They sat on the porch, talked for hours, about the war, about Bruno, about silence. At the end, the boy asked, what did the dog teach you? Marcus looked at Charlie, then said, that strength isn't how loud you bark. It's how long you stay when everyone else leaves. That story ended up in the school newspaper, then a local newsletter, then a regional military blog, then somehow CNN again. Marcus turned down the interviews, but agreed to one thing, a scholarship. He created the Bruno Daniels Memorial Fund for kids who wanted to study animal care, veterinary science, service dog training. Not big, just enough to say, you matter. Just enough to let one more kid believe in purpose. The first recipient, the same teenager who came to his porch, he called Marcus crying. No one's ever believed in me like that. Marcus replied, that's because no one's seen you the way I do. Soon after, a local training center asked Marcus to guest teach. He said yes, brought Charlie with him. At first, Charlie froze, but then he saw Marcus kneel and speak softly to a new rescue pup. And something clicked. Charlie stepped forward, let the kids pet him, licked one of their hands. The entire room paused, then burst into smiles. A girl asked, is he a hero too? Marcus looked at Charlie, at the scars, the crooked ear, the eyes that no longer flinched. He is now. Marcus started visiting shelters every month, not as a rescuer, as a mentor. He didn't fix dogs. He taught people how to stop breaking them, One day, a shelter worker approached him. Since you started coming, adoption rates are up 40%. Marcus blinked. I just show up. She smiled. That's more than most ever do. Back home, Marcus started a small garden beside Bruno's tree. Not flowers, vegetables, food that could feed others. He invited the neighborhood kids to help. At first, only 2 came. Then 6. Then more. One girl asked, "Why do you grow things here?" He smiled. "Because this is where something ended. And now we get to begin again." Charlie loved the garden. He'd lay in the dirt, tail swishing, keeping watch like Bruno once had. One afternoon, Marcus caught him staring at the tree. Still, focused. Then Charlie walked over and laid down beside it. Not as replacement, as continuation. One weekend, Marcus was invited to speak at a canine memorial event again. This time he brought Charlie. He spoke less about loss, more about legacy. Bruno didn't just protect me. He trained me to protect others. Charlie here, he wasn't in combat, but he's in recovery. And that's a kind of bravery we don't talk about enough. After the event, a boy came up and said, "I'm scared to get another dog. Mine died last year." Marcus knelt. "That's okay. Grief makes room for love to grow again, but only when it's ready." The boy smiled, then asked, "Do you think dogs remember us?" Marcus looked at the sky, then whispered, "I think they wait." Weeks later, Marcus received a letter from the Department of Defense. They were launching a new national program, Bruno Protocol, a support initiative for transitioning canine units and veterans. His name was on the advisory board. He framed the letter, hung it beside the front door, so every time he left, he'd remember. Bruno still walks with him. One evening, while sitting by the garden, Marcus began writing again. Not in Bruno's journal. A new one. The first line, "This story isn't about loss. It's about what we choose to plant in the empty space." Charlie laid beside him. Still, calm. The sky turned gold. The wind rustled the leaves of the tree. Marcus looked up and said softly, "We're not done, boy. Not yet." Because legacy doesn't end when the world stops watching. It begins when you keep going anyway. The garden bloomed faster than expected. Tomatoes, peppers, basil, even sunflowers tall and stubborn. But that wasn't the only thing growing. Something else had taken root. A ripple. It started with letters, not local, not even national, from all over the world. Brazil, Norway, South Korea, Egypt, emails, handwritten notes, translated thank yous from people who had never met Marcus, but who had felt something shift when they heard his story. One man wrote, "I'm a dog handler in Johannesburg. My first partner died in a fire set by protesters. No one cared, until I read about Bruno. Now, my department has changed our protocols because you reminded us that they're not tools. They're family." News segments followed. Podcasts, documentaries. A streaming platform reached out, wanted to adapt the story. Marcus declined the film, but said yes to the short doc on one condition. It ends with the tree, not the court. Meanwhile, the Bruno Protocol expanded. It was picked up by 3 other countries. National K-9 Transition and Trauma Recovery Fund was passed in Congress. Marcus didn't attend the bill's signing, but they mailed him a pen. He framed it and placed it beside Bruno's tag. Shelters across the U.S. began implementing Marcus's method, a trauma-informed resocialization program for abandoned or abused working dogs. The first training center to adopt it placed a plaque above their entryway. "Come as you are. Heal as you go." Even law enforcement noticed. A sheriff's department in Arizona now required every new canine handler to take Marcus's seminar. At the first session, one officer asked, "What's the first rule of respect?" Marcus replied, "You don't teach a dog to obey. You teach yourself to listen." Local churches, schools, and libraries started organizing Bruno Days, not for celebration, for service, volunteering, reading to kids, planting trees, donating to shelters. One school principal said, "It's the first time our students stopped asking for prizes and started asking how they could help." Even social media followed. The hashtag Bruno was here trended globally. People used it to post rescue adoptions, kindness moments, small acts of courage, letters to lost pets. It became a movement, without ever trying to be one. Marcus didn't try to lead it. He just kept showing up, answering questions, sharing coffee, sitting beside someone who didn't have the words yet. Because he knew, sometimes the best leaders are just the ones who don't leave. One day, while working in the garden, he was approached by a city councilwoman. She looked nervous, but determined. "Mr. Daniels, we'd like to name a new community space after you." He shook his head. "Name it after Bruno." She smiled. "That's already the dog park. Then name this one after all of them." And so they did. A new center opened, the Daniels Center for Veteran and Companion Healing. It housed a canine adoption wing, free therapy sessions, a community garden, a quiet room with nothing but music and soft lighting, labeled, "For those who need silence to speak." At the ribbon cutting, Marcus didn't speak long. He just said, "When I lost Bruno, I thought I'd lost my purpose. Turns out, I just needed time to realize it was never about one dog. It was about what he helped me become." After the event, a little boy came up to him. Big eyes, tiny fists, holding a rock. "This is for the tree," he said. Marcus knelt. "What tree?" "The one where your dog sleeps." Marcus smiled. "Thank you. He'll like this one." Back at home, Marcus placed the rock at Bruno's tree. There were dozens now, each with words scratched in crayon or marker. "Love," "Soldier," "Good boy," "I miss mine too," "Still here." Charlie sniffed them all, then laid down beside the tree, like he always did. Not to mourn, to keep watch. A year passed, then two. The world didn't forget. It grew. More programs, more rescued dogs, more kids becoming handlers, more men and women finding peace not in power, but in presence. One afternoon, Marcus received a box in mail. No note, just a single item inside. A wooden sign carved by hand. In a world that didn't see him, he stood anyway, and now the world stands with him. Marcus hung it on the porch, right above the swing. So every time he sat, coffee in hand, Charlie at his feet, he'd remember. The world doesn't change all at once. It changes because someone kept going. Autumn came quietly. The leaves fell slower this year, as if reluctant to let go. The sky over Maple Heights stretched wide and gentle, painted in warm golds and patient blues. Marcus sat on the porch, coffee in one hand, Charlie's leash in the other. But Charlie wasn't leashed. He was curled in the garden beside the roots of the tree, the one that marked everything, an end, a beginning, and something in between. Marcus exhaled slowly. There was no fight left in him. Not because he was tired, because he had finally finished the mission. He opened Bruno's old journal. Its spine was frayed, pages soft at the corners, like a well-worn prayer book. He flipped past the entries, the grief, the rage, the silence, until he found the last blank page. He took a pen and wrote, asterisk, "Some stories don't end. They rest and wait to be remembered." Asterisk, he closed the journal, held it for a long moment, then walked barefoot into the garden, bent down beside the tree, and buried the book at its base. Not out of loss, but of completion. Charlie watched, ears perked. Marcus turned to him. "That's where it belongs now." Charlie wagged once, slow and sure, then walked over and sat, his back against the bark, eyes on the world, guarding, just like Bruno had taught him. Later that day, Marcus received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single item. A collar. Worn, faded but intact. Attached was a tag with an engraving. It wasn't Bruno's. It was from a fellow veteran's dog, a soldier Marcus had served with who had passed 6 months ago. Alongside the collar, a note. He always wanted you to have it. Said you were the only other one who'd understand what it meant to keep going when you've got no one left to hold the leash. Marcus stared at the collar for a long time, then placed it beside Charlie's bed. No ceremony, no announcement, just quiet respect. As evening came, he lit the porch lamp. The warm glow wrapped the garden like a memory. He heard soft steps on the gravel, and looked up to see a young woman approaching with a child. The boy held a toy dog, stuffed, stitched together like it had been hugged too much. The woman spoke first. "Sorry to bother you. We were walking, and my son asked if we could stop here." Marcus nodded. "Of course." The boy looked up nervous. "Is this where the real hero dog lives?" Marcus smiled. "He used to, but now he watches over us." The boy held out the toy. "Can I leave this with him?" Marcus knelt. He'd love that. The boy walked to the tree and placed the toy gently between the rocks, then stepped back, saluted, clumsy but heartfelt. "Thank you, Bruno." The mother took her son's hand. As they turned to leave, she looked back. "My husband was a handler, too. He didn't make it. But this place, it feels like a part of him is here." Marcus didn't say anything, just nodded, because sometimes silence was the best kind of welcome. That night, rain came. A soft drizzle at first, then steady. Marcus didn't go inside. He sat on the porch swing, let the rain touch his face, let the wind sing in the trees. Charlie rested his head on Marcus's foot. The earth smelled like beginnings again. Marcus whispered, "You waited long enough, didn't you, boy?" He looked out over the yard, now blurred by tears and weather. "I see it now. You weren't just protecting me. You were showing me how to protect what matters. And now I get it. I really do." Inside, the house was warm. Pictures lined the walls, not of war, but of peace. Dogs, children, gardens, letters. A timeline not of years, but of healing. Marcus stood in the hallway, paused by the mirror, looked at himself. Not the soldier, not the survivor, just a man, whole, human. Here, he picked up a frame from the shelf, the one of Bruno mid-leap, ears flying, mouth open in joy. He kissed the glass. "You kept me alive." He placed the frame back. "Now, I'll keep the story alive." He returned to the porch. The rain had stopped. The stars had come out. He sat beside Charlie and whispered, "Tomorrow we plan again." And somewhere beneath the soil, a journal slept, and above it, a tree stood tall, and beside it, a man and a dog sat quietly, alive. Some heroes don't wear medals. They just wait for us to come home.